Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about something that could very well change all of our lives. You're going to notice that I've done a few things. I've created this video for informational purposes. We are about to see something that is going to revolutionize a lot of people's lives, and I have no stock in this whatsoever. Well, I have invested in it. I've put my money where my mouth is, but I do not gain from you also gaining. I want to be as clear as possible. I do not get a penny for any penny or portion thereof that you invest based on this information. There is no sale. There is no part two. I believe that I do not fail if others succeed, and I want as many people to succeed as possible. I am almost 40 years old, and had I known this in my 30s, I would have retired almost 4 years ago. Okay, so a couple of ground rules. Number 1, you never gamble or invest grocery money. If you have money that you're thinking of using at the end of this presentation, and it is going to cause you a hardship, that is not a sound investment. You need to take care of yourself now so that when you are ready to capitalize on the enormous exponential gains that we are going to see, then you will be in good shape. Number 2, you will notice that there are numbers at the bottom of most of the slides. That serves as both a reference point for you and for me. So, let's get started. What are we going to talk about today? If you go to slide 1, you will see that we are talking about the halving. What is the halving? As you can see on your screen, the halving happens once about every 4 years, and it is how Bitcoin purposely limits the flow of supply into the system. So as value is created and supply is limited, the prices go up. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, especially the ones that we'll talk about today, are not only gaining popularity, but they are also being utilized in countries like Venezuela, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Okay, I'm not going to read these slides word for word. I don't want to insult your intelligence, but at the same time, I'm showing you this because I do not want to offend your experience. I don't know what each individual person who's seeing this has been exposed to, and some of this is brand new. Other people, it's, yeah, let's get to the predictions. We can't get there just yet, but let's move on to slide 3. The halving, and this is well said in the clickable link above. I've made the presentation available as well on a shared Google Drive file. As you can see from this, the halving has to do with the amount of reward that is given to those that are performing the work of mining. Mining, to make it very simple, is where people are rewarded for referencing, checking, and certifying all of the transactions that happen in the Bitcoin network. That's a very simple explanation. There's plenty of stuff online where you can read about exactly what it is we're talking about. That is not nearly as important as some of the information that's coming. And again, I'm not trying to offend your sensibilities. I do not want to insult your intelligence, but we also can't take for granted that some people may not understand how basic economics works. For that, we're going to move to the next slide. Value is based on something called the law of scarcity. You can read what that means there in your own time, but the example on the right will show if you really wanted this pair of shoes and there were only 2 left, you would probably be willing to pay more than the posted price. This is exactly what happened in Venezuela. My family and I traveled to Venezuela to visit some relatives the last week of 2007. We stayed until the first week of 2008. At midnight on December 31st, 2007, the entire country's economy lost 100,000%. They introduced something called the Bolivar Fuerte. Before, they had just used the Bolivar. Long story short, because of the controls that were in place, you could not get actual physical US dollars. So when I brought $400 US into the country, instead of changing for the official rate, I exchanged on what's known as a black market or an alternative market, or as we like to call it, the free market. The free market said that each dollar was not worth whatever it was that the state was willing to trade for. It was actually worth over 2.5 times that amount. For context, we are talking about $400 being instantly worth $1,000 in a different currency. So I had a lot more buying power because of the scarcity of the US dollar. People wanted it, and the government said you can't have it. So the free market found a way. What does all of this mean? So in basic terms, value increases when the influx of supply is limited. When the influx of supply is limited, but the value is increasing, scarcity is created. And that brings us to the next point. This is how gold's value is measured. As more gold comes out of the ground, the gold that remains in the ground becomes increasingly harder to find, and therefore the price goes up. As slide 7a explains, we can predict Bitcoin's future value by using something called the stock-to-flow model. There are really two requirements, the known supply and the known maximum supply. We have both of those criteria. So, gold, we can be fairly accurate. Silver, we can be fairly accurate. Platinum and other precious metals, we can be fairly accurate. Diamonds even, we can be accurate. Bitcoin, we can be just as accurate. Now, if we go to 7b, we can see that there are some predictions at the end of 2021. Specifically, a guy named Plan B, that's his Twitter handle, predicted around $100,000 per Bitcoin at the end of 2021. Now, I am recording this on January 29th, 2020. So for context, the price of Bitcoin is $9,301 on average. On slide 7c, you will find what Plan B posted on March 22, 2019. This is very important because it has accurately predicted since then what Bitcoin will do. You will see that there are very sharp spikes on the colored line. We're going to talk about all that, but it is very important to see a couple of things on this chart. One, the black line is the model, the statistical model that explains where Bitcoin should be, where it has been, and where it is going. The colored line is the historical data plotted on the same graph lines. And on the far right, you will see the color variance from blue to what I think is red, and it's talking about the number of blocks that are mined per month. That is not something you need to focus on at this time. Again, your own research will prove that this is important information, but it is not as important as the information that's coming later as it pertains to what we're talking about. One last thing before we go to the next slide. On the far left, you will notice that this y-axis is exponential. The decimal place has moved. So when we look at future graphs, we will see that it looks a little different, but we need to understand that this particular stock-to-flow presentation on this slide is exponential. Okay, let's go to the next one. The good folks at digitalic.net have done us a solid. You see on the left, we still have the exponential values. We also see that it is a colored graph. On the far right, you'll see a different set of numbers, and this is in reference to the distance in time away from the halving, the first thing we talked about. Something that is interesting, though, if you go to this website, and I've included all the links, you will see that there are several options. If you click those options here, again, on the far right, you'll see I've turned off the differential model price. To add that, you simply click it. I've also excluded the stock-to-flow 10-day model. Moving into slide 9, we are really going to start diving into some data. This is something that a lot of people saw. And the first time I saw this chart, I was a little confused because the stock-to-flow model said that there were spikes, but I don't see any here. We will see in a minute that that's because of scale. Slide 10 has provided a cutout of what you see above it. If you were to zoom in to January 2014, you would see what's on this slide. It looks very familiar, doesn't it? It looks almost exactly like what happened at the end of 2017. And if we go to slide 12, we will see that it happened one time before that as well. So, these are those charts that I had shown you stacked on top of each other. The important thing to notice here is that there is a pattern that is emerging. That is what we're focusing on. There is a pattern of predictability, buying low and selling high. On slide 14, we see a much more robust graph. We find a lot of information here. If we go to the next slide, you will see that I have superimposed the previous information onto the more robust graph. Notice what is developing here. In between halvings, towards the middle of the cycle, we see an enormous spike, an exponential growth curve. I've drawn a circle around where we can expect this next, and I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. That is at the end of 2021. We are less than 24 months away, and the time to invest is now. Why would I say that? How could I possibly make these kind of predictions? No one knows how the stock market is going to work. No one knows the price of gold. No one knows what Bitcoin or anything else is going to do. How can you predict the future? I'm glad you asked. Let's move on to slide 16. This is a very familiar chart. We saw it not that long ago. I want us now to look at slide 17. I've superimposed the top chart, which does not have the exponential number growth on the far left. So in order to see this happen in time, we go to the next slide. In slide 18, I have provided that very information. For your benefit, I've gone ahead and added some more detail in slide 19. You will see the halving events circled with the date. The first Bitcoin halving event happened on November 28, 2012. The second Bitcoin halving event happened on May 9, 2016. And I am making a prediction. Within 1 or 2 days of May 7, 2020, we will see the next halving event. How can I make that kind of prediction? And why would I say such a thing when other reputable websites are saying it is a couple of weeks after that? On the left of slide 20, you will see that the prediction was made on November 29, 2012 that the halving event would occur. It was off by 1 day. In the middle, you will see that the halving event was predicted on July 10, 2016. It was off by 1 day. Now, to be fair, the stock-to-flow chart we've been looking at was made in 2019, but it wasn't corrected for error. It simply predicted that those days would be what they are, and they were. On the right, you will see that May 8, 2020 is where the chart is showing the halving event will occur. If we subtract 1 day, we get May 7, 2020. On slide 21, we see some more information. What I'm showing you here is the distance in time between the halving event and the peak that followed. The first spread was 1 year and 2 days. The second spread was 1 year, 5 months, and 8 days. This is important information, but not nearly as important as what we're about to look at. Why do we need to take action now? Moving into slide 22, we start to develop our answer. On the left is where we are today, or at least where we were on January 27th. Notice the color. In the middle, you'll see where we were relative to the second halving. And on the right, you will see where we were relative to the first halving. What am I trying to communicate here? On slide 23, you'll see yet another familiar graph. If we move to the next one, slide 24, we see something very interesting. The price never goes below where it is in blue. On the right, you will see we're in the blue. All of that to say that cryptocurrency is currently on sale. It's not going to get any cheaper. And based on the data that I've shown you, it's going to go up. That brings us to slide 25. I'd like to talk a little bit about alternative coins or altcoins. 2 in particular, that is Dash and Ripple or XRP. On slide 27, we see something start to develop. The second halving, if you remember, occurred on July 9th, 2016. Bitcoin is on the top, Dashcoin is in the middle, and Ripple, or XRP, is at the bottom. Notice they all experience the same exponential growth curves. If we go to the next slide, we will see that the price at the halving, now remember, we're not at the next halving, we're not at the third halving yet. That's going to occur in May. But at the time of the halving, Bitcoin was going for $650. At the peak, it was just north of $19,000 for a net gain of 2,900%. If we go to the next slide, we will see Dash. Dash was $7.50 at the time of the halving. At its peak in December of 2017, it was $1,400, or 18,600%. At the time of the halving, Ripple was worth 7/10 of a penny. It sold for $3.02 during its peak, 457 times what you had bought it for. For perspective, if you had $1,000 invested into Ripple at the time of the halving, by the time you sold it, assuming you sold it at its peak, you would have $457,000. Now do you see why I'm trying to get people to understand what is about to happen? If we go to the next slide, we'll see a little bit of data. Ripple was released in 2013, so we have no halving data. And Dash was released in 2014. We have no halving data or reliable climb or peak data. So I won't be including Dash in the next comparison. The first halving happened on November 28, 2012. Bitcoin was actually going for $11. So the actual comparison would be a little higher, but because I don't have data about that for Ripple or XRP, we're going to use the date of August 4th, 2013. Each Bitcoin was worth $95.50. At the time of the peak, it sold for $1,000, so roughly 1,000%. XRP, during the same time frame, increased 9,500%. Again, it wasn't around during the halving, so we don't have any data on that. As you can see, the altcoins are reacting rather wildly. Bitcoin is the one that drives it. And the altcoins, the smaller coins, are reacting like little children, going really high, and they also come down just as fast. Cryptocurrencies, altcoins or Bitcoin, are very lucrative, and it's predictable, and they're not going anywhere. And you would be wise to look at what has happened. I've included links to everything that we've seen, and on slide 35 you will see another stock-to-flow chart. But I still think that maybe people don't believe me. There's a website called ifyouhadboughtcrypto.com. I've included a snip here. This was done yesterday, relative to my time, on January 28, 2020. Had you bought Bitcoin on July 27, 2016, for $500? We're not talking about dumping massive amounts of money into it. Some people will say, "Oh, I don't have any money to invest." Can you not go out for 2 months? Maybe read a book and not go out to the movies? Can you put that long weekend vacation on hold to secure your future? Can that new car wait just 1 more year? If you had put $500 into Bitcoin, and we're not talking about peak prices, we're talking about just regular old yesterday's price. If you had put $500 into Bitcoin on July 27th, 2016, and sold it yesterday, it would have been worth almost $7,000. Because you would have earned $6,428.31. Here's some additional resources for you. This is about as much of your homework as I can do. If you need any help, let me know. I'll do my best to help. One last thing before we go. Someone once told me that the best time to invest was 10 years ago. The second best time to invest is today. And I wholeheartedly agree with that, and I put my money where my mouth is. All right, that's all I got. I wish you all nothing but the best, and please do your research.